ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, my dear friends. I am going to start videos on Viveka Chudamani. This is a great holy book of Adi Sankaracharya. This book is one of the most important books on Vedanta. So I start the first video with the prayer or devoted dedication. सर्व वेदांत सिद्धांत गोचरम तम गोचरम गोविंदम परमानंदम सद्गुरुम प्रणतो सम्यहम. This is the first stanza of Viveka Chudamani. My salutations to Sri Sadguru Govinda, who is of the nature of bliss absolute, who can be known only through the import of the essence of Vedanta, and who is beyond the reach of the known instruments of perception. It is very well known that Sri Sankaracharya was a disciple of Sri Govinda Pada, who is traditionally believed to have been the disciple of Sri Gaudapada of the Karika fame. Here in the opening verse, Sankara prostrates to his master Acharya Govindapada. The verse can be interpreted in two possible ways: as a mortal's physical act of prostration unto a finite guru. It has already been interpreted. It can also be understood to mean the spiritual salutation of a man of wisdom to the supreme truth. When thus interpreted, the word aham, meaning I, should indicate the subject as disassociated with the body, mind and intellect. This ego center in the seeker comes to seek its identity with the real and discovers for itself that the Supreme Govinda, the essence in all Vedantic literature, beyond the perception of the sense organs, human emotions and reasoning intellect, can be experienced as the ego's own real nature when contemplation takes place along the lines of discussion indicated in the scriptures. Second mantra. Glory of spiritual life. Jantunam narjanam durballav matah punstvam tato viparta. तस्माद्वैदिक धर्म मार्ग परता विद्वत मस्त मात परम आत्मा अनात्म विवेचनम सब अनुभवो ब्रह्म आत्मना संस्थिति मुक्तिर्नो शत जन्म कोटि सुकृति पुनर्बिना लभ्यते. For all living creatures, a human birth is indeed rare. Much more difficult it is to attain full manhood. Rarer than this is a sattvic attitude in life. Even after gaining all these rare chances to have steady fastness on the path of spiritual activity, as explained in Vedic literature, is yet rarer. Much more so to have a correct knowledge of the deep significances of the scriptures. Discrimination between the real and the unreal, a personal experience of spiritual glory, and ultimately to get fully established in the living consciousness that the self in me is the self in all. These come only later on and culminate in one's liberation. This kind of a perfect liberation cannot be had without earned merits of 100 crores of lives lived intelligently. In the very beginning of the textbook, Sankara is emphasizing the difficulty of awakening ourselves to real communion of the divine in us. In fact, these are innumerable specimens of living creatures in the universe. Truth is the substratum of all and therefore the real nature of all creation, even the inert and the insentient. In stone life too, truth exhibits itself as existence, but unfortunately, the stone is not aware of it. A little more evolved is plant life, which seems to be more aware of the world outside, and so the plant compared to the stone is a higher evolved specimen in the world of beings. When we come to animal life, we find that different species exhibit different degrees of awareness, not only of their external worlds of stimuli, but also of their emotions and feelings. Of them all, man seems to be the only living creature in the universe who is independent for his rational conquests and is the sacred being which, through intellectual conviction, can gain a firm control over the emotions of the mind and apply this regulated and controlled energy for purposes of transcending psychological existence and thereby peep into the boundless realms of bliss and beauty, love and perfection. It is in this sense that the Hindu rishis considered man as the supreme being, while in this modern day and age man is considered great since he has developed technology and can build machines. If one were to follow this argument, the monkey world would take it as a great insult when it hears modern man declaring himself to be a descendant of the ape. Here Sankara seems to emphasize that this text is meant only for evolved human beings since it explains and expounds a theory of spiritual perfection which can be understood, practiced, pursued, and perfected only by men of certain mental caliber and moral character. Such perfect ones who are ripe for a sudden and immediate spiritual self-development are always rare in the world at any given period of its history. Thus the Acharya says that to get a human birth is rare, having got a human birth to have a masculine temperament is rare still. In the interpretation of this verse, a lot of misunderstanding has crept in, and some even glorify their misunderstanding on the score of a Vedic sanction. Thus, Pandits jump to a hasty conclusion and interpret this statement as a direct condemnation of women. According to such a thoughtless reading, women are not considered fit for Vedantic contemplation or self-realization. It is indeed strange how such fantastic ideas gained currency in the country of the great rishis. For more than half our scriptural declarations have been either given out by the divine mothers or were addressed to them directly by the rishis. Then why this special preference shown to the masculine sex? At this juncture, we must bring our discriminative capacity to understand that when these qualifications were given out, they were not given out with reference to the body. With the body, no Vedantic sadhana can be undertaken. The main practices in Vedanta are reflection and meditation, which are to be undertaken by a healthy mind and a keen intellect. So it means that feminine qualities of mind and intellect are to be eschewed. A masculine inner personality full of courage, discrimination, detachment, equilibrium, peace, and cheer is the fittest instrument for a quick march to the goal indicated by Vedanta. When applications are invited by a government, say for the police force and for the engineering department, the qualifications required by the two categories will be different from each other. An applicant for the police force will be rejected if his height is less than the prescribed minimum. But an engineer, if fully qualified and experienced, will be accepted even if he looks unhealthy, lean and pale. In the former category, what is wanted is a good physique, while in the latter, the candidate is expected to fulfill a subtler demand, the required intellectual quality. An expansive chest and a pair of strong biceps are not needed to design a bridge or to plan a power project for the nation, while not much intelligence or calculation is needed in making a successful lathi charge. What is meant is qualifications are declared according to the functions required of the applicant. A seeker in Vedanta is expected to carry out daring intellectual flights to the unknown through a process of deep study, vigorous reflections, and tireless meditations. So, here, when it is said that according to the Shastras he must be a he-man, it must necessarily mean that he should have a special quality of the head and heart. Woman is the symbol of softness, attachment, sentiments, and anxieties. She is essentially a mother. Wherever these qualities predominate, there we have a woman. In this sense, there are many women among bearded ones, and a firmness of determination, detachment, intellectual hardiness, and steadiness of composure are signs of a better evolution. These masculine tendencies of head and heart are amply seen in many women. Therefore, the verse refuses none that chance to study the scriptures and seek through Vedanta one's self-development simply because one happens to have a feminine body. Viparta. This again is a term upon which the orthodoxy built up an absurd interpretation that self-realization is available only for those who are by sheer accident of birth worthy or unworthy sons of Brahmins. This misunderstanding has been glorified to the status of wisdom, and the amount of devastation it has brought to Hinduism looks almost irreparable now. As before, we must consider this qualification also as indicating a special quality of head and heart. Santosh, contentment, samadhana, spirit of self-surrender, and shanti, peace arising from right knowledge are the special qualities, sattvic temperaments of a well-evolved man. Man in any generation, when observed closely, can be classified into three distinct categories: the animal man, the man, and the God man. He who is ever a victim of his gross instincts and a hopeless slave to his emotions and impulses is classified as an animal man. When he has disciplined these instincts in himself, he is considered a full grown, mature human. Such a vipra, meaning a man has the necessary viparta to strive rightly and grow steadily into the last stage of his evolution, the supermanhood or godhood, when he becomes a godman. Vedika Dharma Marga Prata. When one has a human body along with the serener qualities of the heart and the sattvic attitude of the intellect, one is indeed blessed with all the preliminaries for his evolution. But all these can run to waste if not properly harnessed and intelligently applied. So Sankara declares that even after gaining all the above qualifications, rarer still are those who will find the energy to apply themselves faithfully to the methods of integration as suggested in Vedic literature. Selfless karma, rituals and practices of devotion, japa, puja, etc. alone can purify the inner personality and bring more and more integration to it. Concentration increases through desireless actions, and a person who has greater concentration, ekagrata, has necessarily a finer antahakarna. So, steady concentration must be the initial attempt of all seekers, especially those on the path of knowledge. Vidvattam. When such a man has developed a high power of concentration, he becomes fit for a profitable study of the scriptures. But without the true knowledge of the whys and the wherefores of the techniques, he will not be able to keep up his enthusiasm for sadhana because of his limited understanding. Therefore, the study of the scriptures is indicated here, and the literature that shows the goal, declares the path, and gives the rational arguments for both is the Upanishads. When a man having developed his powers of concentration through selfless actions studies the scriptures properly, he gains in discrimination between spirit and matter, the real and the unreal. Soon he comes to realize that the self in him is the self in all, and ere long he gets established in his experience of godhood. Sankara, in enumerating these stages of self development, gives us in a nutshell the unwritten chapters in Darwin's half declared theory of evolution. Here we have all the various stages through which man consciously, by right living and self-progress, climbs on to the lap of the Lord, there to merge with him, there to become Shiva. This is called Mukti, the full and final liberation of a mortal from all his limitations. The last line is not a cry of pessimistic despair, it is the call of hope urging man to wake up and act, to grow and achieve the highest gain. No reader of this verse should consider himself as standing low down in this upward procession. One who feels charmed by the call of Vedanta, who can appreciate its arguments, who feels a sympathetic understanding of the ideal indicated is indeed at the fag end of his transmigrations, the product of an entire evolutionary past. If he makes use of his present chance with diligent and careful application, success is guaranteed to him by Vedanta. This is a call to man to throw off his lethargy, his dejections, his sentiments of self-pity, and to wake up to face life and through understanding to grow fast to reach the goal here and now. Stanza number 3. Unique graces in life. Durlabham त्रियमेव देवा अनुग्रह हेतुकम मनुष्यत्वम मुमुक्षुत्वम महापुरुष संशय. Manhood, burning desire for liberation, the capacity to surrender completely to a man of wisdom. These three things are rare indeed, and wherever they are found, they are due to the Lord's own grace. Earlier we were told how rare is the human birth and the necessary qualifications one must have for a vital and positive living by which one can grow in one's inner evolution. In order to emphasize to the seeker the importance of the qualities which he should have when going to a great man of learning, seeking spiritual knowledge, these qualifications are here stressed. Sankara says that to be born as a human being is a sign of the Lord's grace. After this, to employ in life a deep discriminative understanding and to perceive the ultimate futility of all the ordinary mundane pursuits of life and thereby discover an enthusiasm to seek a nobler path of self-redemption is rarer still. Lastly, when a creature is born as a man, when he feels a gnawing sense of impatience at his own limitations, for him to find the right master to guide him across the thorny paths of his imperfections into the soft meadows of limitless joy and bliss is the rarest. Sankara attributes all these three rounds of seeming luck to the grace of the Almighty. The grace of the Almighty, as expressed in Vedanta, is not to be understood as the blessings of a god, a sultan of the sky sitting amidst the clouds showering special packets of grace on chosen individuals. What is meant here by God's grace is only the sum total of reactions gained through the healthy and intelligent way in which the individual has lived through his many previous lives of great and noble cultural pursuits. Stanza number 4. Miseries of the unspiritual man. Labdva kanthchin janam durlabham tatrapi punstvam shruti pardarshanam yatva atam muktau nayatet mudhi se havyatma atma swam vinihante sadgrahat. Is there a man who, having somehow gained a human embodiment and there having a masculine temperament and also a complete knowledge of the scriptures, is foolish enough not to strive hard for self-realization? He verily commits suicide clinging to things unreal. This verse declares that having been born in a human form and possessed of the necessary masculine qualities of the head and heart, when such an individual has also made a thorough study of the deep significances of scriptural techniques, if he has not the enthusiasm to walk the sacred path and reach the divine goal of self-perfection, such an individual, alas, commits suicide, having got such a rare chance, a chance in a million. If he is not ready to take hold of it and use it in a profitable manner, he is indeed committing harakiri, and such a squanderer of human birth is very fittingly termed by Sankara as a dull fool, muddadihi. Muddadihi. How does a person commit this senseless suicide? By his false attachments with the objects of the world, as he looks out from the parapets of his body and his mind, forgetting his own real nature, which is all pervading consciousness. He comes to misunderstand himself to be the matter envelopments which are nothing but thought created incrustations incrustations thought created incrustations around the divine in him. Perceiving through the prism of the body, mind, and intellect, he sees the truth splashed and splintered into endless plurality, and the objects give a delusory enchantment to the senses and the mind. To satisfy these urges of his body and his mind, the individual runs after the objects. Necessarily, such a deluded person, having misunderstood his real nature, becomes the sansaric ego center, a victim of his own ignorance. This fall of the self to be the selfish ego is spiritual suicide. There is no real suicide possible to the Atma. No danger can come to me simply because I dream the greatest of dangers, even though the dreamer in me suffers all the dangers of my dream. The moment I wake up, I realize that the dangers as well as the dreamer who suffered them were all my own mental creations, only in an unsubstantial dream world. So, from the standpoint of reality, there is no suicide, but Sankara comes down to our level to help us discriminate between the real and the unreal, in and through our day-to-day life, and it is in this sense that he says we commit suicide. It is not the destiny of the self to suffer, but it is the lot of the ego that strives in this world to be the sacred and the divine. Stanza number 5. Ite कौनवस्ति मूढ़ात्मा यस्तु स्वार्थे परमादत्ति दुर्लभम मानुषम देहम प्राप्य तत्रापि पौरुषम. Is there a greater fool than the man who, having got the rare chance of a human miseries of the unspiritual man, birth, and thereto the masculine qualities of the head and heart, falls short in his efforts to rediscover himself? All creatures must wait for millions and trillions of years until nature takes them up step by step and molds them into greater evolutionary equipments. In all the lower strata of existence, evolution is not a conscious development on the part of the individual but an involuntary thrust up received by him from the course of nature. Millennia of growth, change, and decay must pass before a rock becomes soil. The soil anchors a tree, the tree bears fruit, and the fruit contributes towards the making of a human being. Millions and trillions of spermatozoa and ova are produced, but only a few of them are united to create a human being. Of all the countless possibilities to be born, a human is a rare chance indeed. And having thus got a human form, what do we do with it? Man, because of his mind and intellect equipment, is to an extent free from nature in evolving himself. Man alone of all the species of the living kingdoms can hasten his own evolution by cooperating with the great eternal scheme of things around him. Physically, he has evolved to perfection, and nature has nothing more to improve him. His next lap of evolution awaits him at the level of his mind and intellect, and this is a process in which nature cannot help him at all. With this shastric conclusion in mind, when the Acharya takes up his pen to guide the generation, he must necessarily exclaim and conclude that there can never be a greater fool than the one who, being blessed with a human birth and the necessary mental and intellectual capacities, does not intelligently invest them for the higher purpose of self-redemption and self-rediscovery. Stanza number 6. वदन्तु शास्त्राणि यजन्तु देवान् कुर्वन्तु कर्माणि भजन्तु देवतः आत्मैक्यबोधेन विना विमुक्ति न सिद्ध्यति ब्रह्मसतान्त्रे अपि. Let erudite scholars quote all the scriptures. Let gods be invoked through sacrifices, let elaborate rituals be performed, let personal gods be propitiated. Yet, without the experience of one's identity with the self, there shall be no liberation for the individual, not even in the lifetime of 100 Brahmas put together. A disciple who has come to the feet of a master of Vedanta is expected to know already some of the traditional techniques of the religious world, wherein for purposes of training the animal man into the man, various methods of discipline have been advised, such as study of the scriptures, performing sacrifices, making offerings, worship of a personal god, and even selfless seva. Here the master is addressing those few who, having practiced all these with sincerity and diligence for a number of years, have come to feel poignantly their limitations and in their growing dissatisfaction with ritualistic religion, having rushed to the Master's feet, seeking guidance along their path for self redemption. To such a student, the Master has to tell the naked truth and all of it, keeping nothing back. So, here is a passage which reads like an out and out condemnation of the ritualistic aspects of all religions. There is a type of dull seekers who have become so addicted to their method of spiritual practices that they would rather claim a dreary patience with life and its pains, with their disappointments in sadhana and faith, than dare take up a more satisfying and advanced practice. This is in fact an expression of their superstitious fear at leaving the path which they have been practicing for so long. A devotee who has been through kirtan, puja, japa, and dhyana, developing his devotion for a personal God for a number of years, will not dare to drop for a short time even an iota of his daily routine, even if he were asked to do so by the greatest living master in the world. Just as one gets addicted to a false way of living, so one can easily become habituated to whatever is accepted as a good way of living. To live in a routine will never yield the secret of living in inspiration. To get habituated to any method is to get into a rut and balk all progress. We must have the freedom at every moment to change our pattern of living and seek new methods of keeping the mind and intellect occupied in a lively warmth of love and cheer. Else, even our worship becomes mechanical and in the end stultifying. In this sense, Vedanta is heretical and revolutionary. The attitude with which one should do the hearing Sarvana of the scriptures is totally different from the attitude with which one is asked to do reflection, manana upon what one has heard. Again, neither the Shraddha nor Sarvana nor the intellectual freedom of manana are permitted to poison the deep serenity of the thoughtless meditation hours. Thus, a Vedantic student is taught from the very beginning to be original at every moment and to live ever in the white heat of inspiration at once thrilling, divine, ennobling. Here, as soon as the student reaches the master, he is washed clean of all his traditional beliefs. This is indeed a kind of shock therapy by which the student is brutally shaken out of the deep ruts into which He may have fallen and shown new dimensions of thought along the straight path. His wrong notions about religion, his confirmed belief in rituals, his blind faith in hearsay are all shown here as having nothing to do with true and permanent liberation. Learning the Shastras, invoking gods through sacrifices, selfless work, and even devotion to a personal god have been denied as having any capacity to give us mukti. Even in the lifetime of 100 Brahmas, which is according to our mythology equivalent to billions and billions of years. This is not at all a statement of despair, but a way of self discovery. The secret of which is for the seeker to realize that the self in him is the self in all is prescribed here. The method of this discovery, the meaning of the self, etc., are all the theme of this text. Stanza number 7. अमृत तवश्य नाशास्ति वित्ते नेते व्येव ही श्रुति ही ब्रवीति कर्मणो मुक्ते रहे तुत्वम सफुटम यतः. It is clear that liberation cannot be the effect of good works, for Shruti herself declares that there is no hope for immortality by means of wealth. Amrita Tattvam is the goal indicated in all the Upanishads. When it is translated as merely immortality, readers are apt to misunderstand it to be a profit that can accrue to man only after his death. This misunderstanding then must take away the edge from religion and dry up all enthusiasm for spiritual living, especially from the modern man who wants immediate gains. He is not ready to invest even a thought in a proposition that will yield to him a great profit only at a future time. Even if we promise him a great existence after death, the modern educated youth will not be interested, since what he seeks is immediate joy and perfection here and now. At this healthy insistence of the sons of the land, the old orthodox Pandit despairs and brands them as atheists. This is an unfair conclusion. Correctly interpreted, the immortality promised by the Shrutis is not a state or condition that comes to us after our departure from this world. It is a perfection that can be lived here and now. By the term immortality, the rishis indicate a state of continuous existence which has in it no experience of finitude. The disturbance is caused by the multiple experiences that rise and fall in us are the causes for all our sorrows, and man, knowingly or unknowingly, is struggling hard to continue his experiences. It is very well known that even in deep sorrow, if the experiences are continuous, the experiencer must come to smile in his sorrow, else we would not have had even one peal of laughter from our slum areas. The rich man wants to stretch continuously his experience of joy in his wealth, but alas, it diminishes with the passage of time. All over the world, modern man is struggling to increase his joy in life, to maintain his virulence, to lengthen his lifespan, and in 1,001 other activities. There is an anxious impatience with law of finitude that seems to whip man from all sides. The word immortality in Vedanta indicates not a continuous and monotonous living in joy in a hazy yonder there, but a perfection here within ourselves by which we can, irrespective of the circumstances that play around us, come to live a continuous experience of tranquility and peace. The mental equilibrium, which refuses to entertain any revolting or choking disturbances from without, this mental poise and intellectual dexterity which make it possible for the mind to rise in revolt against itself. This endless peace cannot be gained, says Sankara, through the wealth, Vittam, of sense objects, Vittam, though it generally means wealth, here means the wealth that gives us immediate experiences, and indeed it is the sense objects that directly convey experiences to us from the external world. So, a continuous and infinite experience of peace and tranquility, joy and perfection cannot be had through the satisfaction of our animal urge by procuring, maintaining, and enjoying these ephemeral sense objects. In this sense, this verse throws a flood of light on the previous one. No number of sense objects, be they as sacred as the Vedic text, no amount of activities, be they as sacred as yagnas or worship, can by themselves take us to that mental poise. All Acharyas, irrespective of their philosophical beliefs, accept the declarations of the scriptures as absolute and as having unquestionable authority. This attitude is not acceptable to the modern youth who, in his colossal ignorance, thinks himself daring enough to question even the rishis. He may not dare to question in his physical classroom and will silently and satisfactorily swallow a statement such as that electrons and protons are moving with a terrific frequency around a neutron in every atom. His spirit of inquiry and craze of understanding seem to freeze when it comes to modern science, but the moment he hears the declarations in ancient text, he finds in himself the audacity to question, but unfortunately has not the courage to examine or the stamina to experiment with those ideas. What a letdown! The great Acharyas of yore were not the senile or idiotic dreamers we are prone to label them. This is not only an insult to their intelligence but also to our own and that of our ancestors who believed and followed them with benefit. The Acharyas accepted the declarations of the Shrutis because of the bona fide character and temperament of the rishis who declared them. They did not, like politicians, go to the public to thrust their ideas down the throats of the listeners. They lived in complete contentment and happiness in their self discovery, and it was for the seekers to make a footpath and reach them with their questions and doubts upon life and its meaning, the goal, and the path. To those seekers, out of sheer kindness, these men of realization declared the truth of their own experiences in a burning spirit of inspiration and love. They had no intentions to misguide these precious young hearts of the generation. These rishis had no ashrams to build or missions to run, so they wanted no agents to hoodwink people and collect funds. They desired nothing, they asked for nothing, they demanded nothing. Physically, as far as they were concerned, they were dead and wanted the world to accept them as such. To such men of wisdom who had divorced themselves so completely from the world of desires and demands to impute low motives for misguiding their generation would reflect only upon our lack of understanding of the literature. When we study a Shakespearean drama, we go to great lengths to understand the life of the dramatist and the England of Elizabethan times. But these scientific methods of study are totally ignored when we come to the scriptures, where we do not even try to understand the mental attitude, the intellectual accomplishments, the physical environments, etc., under which the great rishis served, worked, and lived. The Acharya accepted the Shruti declarations as eternal aspects of the one truth. Later on, for those who want more logic and reason, we have a number of verses which support the assertion that work, no matter how noble or divine, cannot by itself tune the individual perfectly to that equanimous and peaceful mental attitude wherein he can come to experience in this variegated world of pluralistic experiences a continuous and unbroken peace of perfection. Stanza number 8, Means of Wisdom. Atho vimuktai प्रियतेत विद्वान सन्यस्त बाह्य अर्थ सुखस्पृहि सन संतम महांतम समुपेत देशिकम तेनोपदी दिष्टा अर्थ समाहितात्मा. Therefore, the learned seeker who is striving to gain this freedom within and who has renounced all his desires for pleasure in the sense objects should duly approach a good and generous master and must live attuned to the true significances of the words of the master. If Shruti declares that a man cannot achieve victory over his lower self and inner weaknesses through actions, however glorious and noble they may be, one is apt to conclude that there is no method by which one can redeem oneself. This despair, perhaps, the master noted on the face of the disciple and so hastened to console him. We have here a positive declaration of what exactly a seeker should do in order that he may be well established on the path of truth. A seeker in Vedanta is not a non-entity who has walked into the sanctum of a temple or has casually thought of sitting in prayer or visiting a sacred place. These constitute but the very primary steps in spiritual life. A student entering the halls of wisdom can gain admission only when he has had a good education not only in the marketplace but also in the great works discussing the theory and meaning of life. Hence, the word Vidwan is used here to indicate a true seeker. When therefore a student having had a cursory knowledge of life and its meaning realizes the futility of running after sense objects, he comes to a certain amount of renunciation of desires and thus he approaches his master. Sankara in this verse also lists the special qualifications necessary for a seeker on the spiritual path. Santam. The word Shanta is often used in the vernacular to indicate a sannyasi, but rarely does one realize what exactly the term means. He is a sant who is firmly established in the consciousness of pure existence, Sat. A guru must not only be a man of full realization and experience, but he should be a Mahantam, a large-hearted, sympathetic, kind person. Without these qualifications of the heart, he will not be able to come down from the high seat of his experience and mingle with the imperfect seekers who come to him and fully understand their difficulties on the path. One can be a guru only if one has the required magnanimity, intimate personal experience of the divine, and great familiarity with the scripture. A thorough study of the scriptures gives the teacher the necessary language of expression and also the required intellectual arguments to resolve a student's double into abiding convictions. There are innumerable great saints who have been sitting silently in their caves, brimful with their experiences, and yet unable to communicate to the world of seekers. There are, on the other hand, many among us who have the music in them but no flute to transform it into a melody. Therefore, the word Desikam, well read in the scripture, is of special importance. Even if a seeker discovers such a perfect master, he will not be able to react favorably in the master's presence or even to his discussions if he has not the necessary mental attitude denoted by the word sampoteya. The manner of approaching a master is not merely a prescription for a shapeless formality. It specifies mainly a mental attitude. If we approach a master with the objective of judging him or evaluating his knowledge, certainly we are not going to benefit. There are some who approach a man of wisdom to make him understand how far they are men of wisdom themselves. This exhibition, this exhibitionism of their laboriously gathered second-hand information will choke their hearts and they will not be able to gain anything from the master's words which rise from his own first-hand experiences. Water flows only from a higher level to a lower level. So too it is with the flow of knowledge. Unless we have the meekness and the spirit of surrender, knowledge cannot reach us. The divine attitude of full receptivity is the aroma of a heart which has reverence for and surrender to faith in and love for the Guru. These are therefore insisted upon in the Shastras, but they may seem to the modern man as arrangements set up by a team of social criminals to loot and plunder the credulous public. Such an opinion reflects the level of decadence into which modern man has fallen. Again, even with all the prescribed qualifications, if a seeker were to reach the feet of a perfect master, the transferred knowledge cannot take root in the student unless he is himself ready to strive along the path. The instructions given here explaining how he should conduct himself in the presence of the master are very significant indeed, especially so in our times when we are all laboring under terrible misunderstandings about this guru shishya relationship. After all, a master can only explain truths and give sufficient logic to give the seeker intellectual conviction. These ideas are at best prescriptions for certain values of life which cannot yield any benefit unless they are taken up and made a part of the entire scheme of our evolution. The major part of the work depends upon our own efforts to rehabilitate ourselves. Thus, it is said the individual should try to live the deep significances of the precepts of the Master. More often than not, we find that we try to follow what the Master did and not what he said. Here it is definitely pointed out that we have nothing to do with what the Master does, else we should have to applaud the traders in bhakti who conveniently declare that there is only the fifth marriage while their Lord had 16,008. There can be indeed very interesting varieties even in the method of self destruction. Stanza number 9. उदव्रेता आत्मन आत्मनं मग्नं संसार वारिद्धो योगा आरूढ़ मासाद्य सम्यक दर्शन निष्ठया. Having attained the state of yoga through continuous and well established discrimination, one should lift oneself from the ocean of change and finitude wherein one has come to be drowned. When an individual has realized his limitations and feels that he must by some means redeem himself from his weaknesses and gain mastery over himself, it is not sufficient that he surrenders to his master no matter how great, or runs away from the world into a quiet jungle, or even makes a thorough and complete study of all the scripture. Practices such as these may somewhat help the individual, but he can lift himself from the mire of his inner weaknesses only by dint of sustained self effort. Through study, following of Shastraic instructions, practices of self-control and various other spiritual sadhanas generally undertaken in the name of religion, one can expect to develop the subtlety of one's inner instruments for experiencing the world as it is, uncolored by any personal prejudices, attachments, or hatreds. This perception of the world as it is in perfect detachment and discrimination is called Samyug Darshana. Darshana in Sanskrit also means philosophy, and therefore the term can also be interpreted as the vision of the world through the eye of philosophy. When one views life from this angle and with a right mode of perception, slowly and steadily, one gains the state of a yoga ruddha. When desires are not murmuring, thoughts cannot arise, and when thoughts do not rise, there will be a complete cessation of actions. When an individual, through study, satsang, and intelligent thinking, has come to observe life and its happenings with the right attitude, and intellectual poise, he automatically gets established in yoga. The word yoga has come to be associated with so many unnecessary trappings that a student is apt to miss his grip on its import here. Yoga, in its right sense, is only that state of mind in which the mind, having recognized its weaknesses, attunes itself to a greater and more perfect ideal which the intelligent has shown it. When the which the intellect has shown it, any attempt of the mind to rise from the low values of its present existence to a healthier and diviner scheme of living is yoga. To get established in yoga is to make it a habit to strive sincerely to rise above one's known weaknesses in order to attain the ideal. So I conclude this video. Next video number 2, I will start with the stanza number 10 of Viveka Chudamani. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar.